Thank you, Dr. Robert. Fellow Rotarians and welcome guests, I am thrilled to be here with you today. But as you can see, I am not the governor, I'm not a famous coach, but I will make you two guarantees, two promises. I guarantee you that the information I give you today, you will use for the rest of your lives. And also that if you will share this information with your children, grown or small, grandchildren, colleagues, teams, troops, groups, churches, whatever, they will also use this information for the rest of their lives. And my second promise is, if you allow me to sit at your table at future meetings, I will do something highly inappropriate so that you'll feel very comfortable. And as Mary Poppins says, you will not think that I am practically perfect in every way. I am not. I'll lick my fingers or do something equally gross. All right. So, why do we need etiquette? It sounds so old-fashioned. Well, we all know what this stuff is. Etiquette is like WD-40. I know this is not a lubricant, it's a water displacement. But WD-40 helps smooth out the rough bumps, it gets rid of the rust, it makes things move along better, and so is etiquette. Etiquette is about smoothing out the rough edges, it's about relationships. And etiquette is also like hot air. Hot air. Well, the French statesman Georges Clemenceau was writing to the Paris Peace Conference when a companion said, "Bof, diplomacy is nothing but a lot of hot air." And replied Clemenceau, "Oui, all etiquette is hot air, but that is what is in our automobile tires, and notice how it eases the bumps." Lord knows in this town with our potholes, we need to have our tires full of hot air, and we all need etiquette. Etiquette is about relationships, it's about respect and kindness, and it's another tool to give you a competitive edge in this very competitive world. Because sometimes that's just the little part that distinguishes you. The other day, my family interviewed two realtors to list my mother's big farm in Mississippi. One of them came chewing gum and smacked gum the whole time we were interviewing her. And we were like, so who knows? But etiquette is, as defined, it's the rules and conventions governing correct or polite society, behavior in society in general, or in a particular social or professional group or situation. It's not official and it changes over time. So how is it different from protocol? Well, protocol is a code of conduct. It's the etiquette of state occasions. And protocol are actually written rules. It's the convention of correct behavior on official or state occasions, and it is fixed over time. For example, military has all sorts of protocol. Anytime the president has a state dinner, there is so much protocol that goes on there. I trained at the Protocol School of Washington, and they have a whole week-long session, class on just handling state protocol. I'm glad I'm not doing that. I'd probably be in jail somewhere. But the benefits of protocol and etiquette intelligence are many. You distinguish yourself from the competition, you can develop and maintain business, you project a positive image, you project confidence and authority, you build teamwork. And isn't that what it's all about, is building teamwork so that you're not aggravating the bejeez out of somebody and not even aware of it. And as we say, good manners are free, but they're also priceless. Good manners are free, but they're also priceless. So make other people feel comfortable because you know what you're doing. So let's get into the nitty-gritty stuff right now. Let's start with name badges. Everybody's got a name badge in here. Andrew's going to help me here for a second. Name badges go on the right side up at your shoulder. If you have one of those lanyard things, where's Laura? Laura, stand up. Laura's got one of those lanyard things. And if I want to see what her name is, I have to do some navel gazing to see what her name is. So yeah, so she's, if you ever go to a meeting and you've got a lanyard and it's down around your tummy, try to lift it up to your shoulder. So Andrew's going to come and shake my hand. Thank you, Andrew. And as I make eye contact with Andrew, if I've forgotten his name, I can just kind of glance right down to his shoulder. It's on his right shoulder, as is mine, because we just look right up the arm. So, thank you very much. I'm gonna keep this man working though. So put your name tag on your right shoulder. I'm not gonna watch, you don't have to change it now, because it makes it easier for whoever you're going to speak to. So, business entertaining. I am sure that everybody in here has invited a client or a potential donor or a customer to lunch or dinner. There are some conventions that you want to follow when you're entertaining for business purposes. Let's start with extending the invitation. You have to think about, what does your guest like or dislike? Where is their office located? Do they have allergies? Are they vegan, kosher, halal, gluten-free? Do they have simple tastes, fancy tastes? All of that has to go into consideration of where you're going to go, because I'm going to assume you will go to a restaurant. The host chooses the restaurant. This is one of the most important points. You never ask a guest, well, where do you want to go? Because your guest is on the spot. Well, we're going to go to Panera, or we're going to go to Ruth's Chris. They may not know the limits of your hospitality. You choose the restaurant as the host, and you have to consider their tastes and their locations. Always state the purpose of your invitation. Your guest doesn't want to get to a meal and all of a sudden you're picking their brain for information which perhaps they get paid for. So you want to tell your guest what they're in for, what you want to discuss, if it's a contract, if it's donation, whatever. Let them know what to expect. Be very precise about the time, date, of course, place, and where you will meet in the restaurant. You don't want to be at the table and your guest is in the lobby thinking that you're late, and vice versa. You don't want to be in the lobby and they're at the table already. So you can always say, meet me at the table, or I will meet you in the lobby, or at the captain's table. And then if the captain seats you, the captain goes first, then your guest, then you. And that's the way you go to the table. Be sure to confirm your reservation with the restaurant and with your guest or guests. And be sure that everything is copacetic. If you know the restaurant well, and you should develop a relationship with a good restaurant, pick your table. You want to avoid the avoidable, such as the restroom or the kitchen or a mirror. It's kind of disconcerting to watch yourself in a mirror, or kitchen, restroom, anywhere that's, the front door, anywhere that's noisy, the wait staff station. So try to avoid those if you can when you pick your table. Now, if you don't want the bill presented to you at the end of the meal, there are a couple of ways to handle that. The best way is, if you know the restaurant again, you can give your credit card to the captain or the maitre d' or the hostess or host and say, look, do not present my bill at the table, please. Run it up at the end of the meal, add X% of tip. We're all generous, make it 20%. You can motion me, I'll come to the captain's table and I will sign it, and then that's it. It is never presented at the table. So all you have to do at the end of the meal is say, I have really enjoyed our company or our conversation or whatever it is. You don't have to mess with the bill. I'm not good with math, so 20%, 15% is a real challenge for me. I always do it. If you must cancel, whether you are the host or the guest, do it personally. Don't delegate it to someone else in your office to call and cancel, and then try to set up another meeting together. I'm sure everybody thinks they knows what RSVP stands for. Répondez s'il vous plaît. It really means respond so very promptly. Don't wait. You have 24 to 48 hours for a written invitation, and of course on the phone you should accept or decline right away. So respond so very promptly when you can. When you get to the table at the restaurant, if you're the first one and you're going to meet your guest at the table, wait. Don't touch anything on the table. Don't mess with your napkin. Don't stir your tea. Your guests should come and see the table freshly laid as it was when you got there. When your guest arrives, stand up to greet them, shake hands. We don't have time to do good handshakes, but I think you all have that down by now. Give the guest the best seat, which is to your right, and the guest should look out into the room. When I used to take legislators out for a luncheon, they never wanted to have their backs to the door. So sit anybody in a spot where they can look out into the room and they can see people coming. And it should be to your right. Having someone to your right rather than across the table is a little more intimate. You can talk a little bit better. And if you're comfortable with that, put them on your right. Offer your guest a beverage, not a drink. And never feel obliged to drink alcohol at a luncheon if you don't want to. If you're with someone who says, oh, have a drink, it's just a drink, and you don't want to, or it's not your company policy, there's no reason that you must feel obliged to have a drink, an alcoholic drink. Now, when it gets down to ordering, you can discreetly indicate the limits of your hospitality. You might say, oh, the lobster here is really great. All right. Or the luncheon specials are just great, especially the children's plates. But you never know what somebody's budget is. You don't have to get the most expensive thing on the menu, nor must you order the least expensive thing. You don't have to do rubber chicken every day. But you can let them know sort of what your budget is. Allow your guest to order first, after you've discussed the menu with the waitstaff if you need to. Why? Because if your guest orders soup, salad, fish, entree, dessert, and everything else, you should do too, so that your guest is never eating alone. Okay, so you could take it home with you, but we'll talk about that. So you always get food together, and your guest is not feeling like, wow, I sure am eating a lot. Maybe they're hungry. So order the same number of courses as they are. Now, I do usually suggest at a nice restaurant, if you haven't finished your whole meal, don't have it boxed at the table, because otherwise, you know, you're doing this with your plate, and you got all this stuff all over your hands and your knife, and it's gross. So if they will take it to the back and box it for you there, fine, but I don't recommend boxing up a meal to go right there in front of everybody. Any questions so far?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
For a lot of us men that are in the business casual world, we end up having a pocket on our left but not our right, which lends itself to a tag like this. Are there circumstances where perhaps the left side is appropriate?
Well, not unless you're shaking hands with your left hand, I guess, but you could always clip it to your collar. If you have a magnet, those are great. Magnets are great, pins are great, whatever. And if you just can't, well, just go with the flow. And if you all, I'm sorry, I should have repeated the question. He asked if there was ever an appropriate time to have your name tag on the left. And if it's a stick-on, you know, we tend to be mostly right-handed, and so we'll stick it right onto our left shoulder. Try to stick it on your right shoulder. Okay, let's get into some silverware. And we asked Drusilla not to clear plates for the purpose that you still have a knife and a fork and a plate in front of you. That's why. First of all, you may want to know, how do I know when I get to a table what's mine and what is my neighbor's? There is a way. This is not a commercial, and they're not paying me to do this. BMW is a great way to remember what's mine and what's yours. If you look at your place setting, usually your bread plate will be on the left. I'm directionally impaired, I'm from New Orleans. So it's going to be at the top left, your meal in the middle, and your wine and the water will be on the right. If you look at those posters, you'll see there's a bread plate, top left, then your meal, then wine and water. So if you don't want to do this thing that we all learned as kids, B and D. I do not want to see an adult sitting at a table going, Remember this, BMW, bread, meal, wine, and water, okay? None of that B and D stuff. Let's talk about napkins. We need them, but we generally don't know what to do with them. Fortunately, I have never seen anybody in here surrender. That's a good thing. It's not a sweat rag, it's not a do-rag. It goes on your lap. You should fold it at the top, about a third or a quarter down, and you put the fold towards your waist. That's where your napkin goes. And like I said, you don't pick up your napkin until your guests or your other dining companions have arrived. If you have to excuse yourself during the meal, and you don't need to say where you're going, a used napkin goes on the chair, or the back of the chair, or the arm of your chair if you have that. Only at the end of the meal should you place your napkin on the table. Please, never place it in the middle of your plate. What you do is you pick it up in your right hand, you run it through your left hand, and you put it to the left of your plate. And that's how you indicate that you have finished. This is part of the silent service code also, that you have finished the meal, and it goes to the left of your plate. So, and there you go. Napkin know-how, there we are. Okay, let's talk about silverware savvy. Whew.
Hey, Emily,
Yes.
do you ever tuck your napkin in your?
The question is, do you ever tuck your napkin in up here? Well, if you're at a crawfish boil, absolutely. If you're outside, that's fine. If I'm going somewhere and I know I'm going to have spaghetti, I'm wearing a red shirt because I know it's going on my white shirt, or a black shirt like that, a black blouse. But generally, I would say, no, don't do this. No, and you can lean over a little bit over the table, but if you're leaning over, tell your kids, bring your food to your face, not your face to the food, so that you're not just shoveling it in. So, and that if it's red and white, check, I guess, yeah, go ahead and, put it in there. Good question, thank you, Bobby. Silverware savvy. Okay. Get your knife and your fork. Get your knife and your fork in your hands. I mean this. This is interactive here. Okay. In your dominant hand, you will have your fork, and in your less dominant hand, you'll have your knife. Place them so that the handle is in the middle of your palm, and the middle of your utensil is at your first finger. You'll curl your thumb and your fingers around it, and you'll turn them over. And that's how you're going to, you spear your meat or whatever, and that's how you're going to cut. You only cut, really, I'll tell you the highest and best. You only cut on the pull stroke. We all tend to saw. I do. I will saw at your table, I promise. It only cuts, a knife only cuts on the pull stroke. Then you put your knife at the top of your plate. You change hands like we do. You spear whatever it is that you're going to eat, and you convey it to your mouth. But I see, with forks and knives, I see the javelin. I see the double bass. I see the violin. And then there's the rowboat, too, where the utensils are sticking out over the side of your plate. The rowboat is pretty dangerous. If you happen to hit something, they could go flying. Same with a soup spoon. If it's in your soup cup, I guarantee you, I'm not going to do this, but I guarantee you if you hit that end of the spoon, it's going to go flying across the room. So you want to minimize the possibilities for disaster at a dinner. Silverware, as you can see on both of these posters, silverware is a roadmap to what you're going to have. That poster is a 6-course meal, and you would start from the outside and work your way in. And your and you should put your used utensils on your plate when you're finished, and the wait staff will clear them, and so then you just work your way in. Okay, so how do you know what's yours and what's mine, forks, knives, spoons? Okay, how many letters in the word left? This is not a trick question. Okay, 4, very good. How many letters in the word fork? 4, very good. How many letters in the word right? 5. And in the word spoon? And in the word knife? You got it. So on the right goes your knife and your spoons. And on the left go your forks. The only exception is that little cocktail fork for like a shrimp cocktail. That's the only exception. But as you can see, that's the way it works. At the top are dessert spoon and fork. And if you're at a really fancy place, your wait staff will come and pull that knife that spoon and fork down to the side so that you're ready for dessert. So there it is. Questions so far on silverware? All right. Oh. Okay. Used utensils never go back on the table with the exception of an iced tea spoon. If we were really in a fancy, fancy place, you might have a little saucer with a doily under your iced tea, and you would put your used iced tea spoon on that saucer. But lacking that, your used iced tea spoon just has to go back on your table. Now, I'm going to borrow Carol's iced tea here. And I always tell my kids, you want to stir quietly. I had them do this in here, where they all stirred their tea at the same time really noisily, and it made quite a racket. So if you're stirring lemon or sugar or whatever, same with coffee, you can stir quietly. Thank you. This is a clean spoon if you want to use it. Okay. So that's a little bit about used utensils. When I teach kids, I always ask them, well, what do you really hate to see people doing? Oh, they'll say, I hate to see people chew with their mouths open or scrape their teeth on their fork. They have all kinds of things that they really hate. It's funny. But this is a good lesson. All right, what are these? Cherry tomatoes. It's not a trick question. Cherry tomatoes. And I also have up here some little bitty blueberries. And if I had had grapes, I would have brought them too. So you think this is harmless fruit and vegetables. No, ma'am. This is an IED, an intra-mouth explosive device. Because if you don't have your mouth closed when you're chewing one of these little suckers, it's like, pew! Yeah. And it's really embarrassing to do that in front of polite company. So remember, tell your kids, chew with your mouth closed, don't make any noise. Because again, it's about the relationships, and you don't want to sit at a table with somebody chewing like a cud chewing its cow. I mean, a cow chewing its cud. Yeah, I was up too late. I went to Catholic schools, I'll admit, with nuns, and we were never allowed to chew gum because they would say, you look like a cow chewing its cud. And they have a point. So I don't chew gum. It's not good for your braces or your teeth, but anyway. Bread and butter. I promised you some bread and butter. Basics. These little things can get us into so much trouble. I was at a very nice function Saturday night in New Orleans, and I watched with horror as someone at another table slathered this whole thing with butter and then put it in her mouth. Well, of course, she had a butter mustache, and it was really not very, very fun. So let's say I'm out at a luncheon with a potential employer or with my current employer, and I'm going to eat bread like this, and then all of a sudden,
Emily, we want to give you a promotion.
oh,
Are you going to take it?
ha, what do I do? Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I'll take it. Am I going to bite this off and try to chew it very quickly and hope I don't choke to death? Am I going to take the whole thing out of my mouth? Not a good option. The way to eat bread, yes, you may use your fingers. You're going to take a small piece. You would butter this small piece, assuming it's on your bread and butter plate. You do that over your bread and butter plate. You can take this small piece and put that in your mouth. And if he asks me, whether he asks me if I'd like a promotion or I'm with my boyfriend and he asks me to marry him, I can put this little piece in my mouth and say yes. So remember that. Just a little piece, you just butter one piece. Don't slather the whole thing with butter. My mother used to ask us, and to which plasterers' union do you belong? We knew what she meant. We didn't do that very often. All right, I have to swallow this. All right, that's bread and butter basics, the silent service code, and I also want to mention a few things to endear ourselves to the wait staff here and elsewhere. Ladies, they can trip on your purses. My husband had a one-day career as a waiter in college. He tripped on somebody's purse. He had a whole tray of water. Everybody got a free shower, and he was out of a job. Thank goodness that was not his chosen profession. So make sure your purses or briefcases, gentlemen or ladies, are not where they could trip somebody up. You can put them on the back of your chair. You can put them in front of your feet, but don't leave them where they could be a hazard. Also, I've heard waitstaff say, please don't lean your chairs into the table like we tend to do at, where is it, at LSU? The Stadium Club, everybody does that to indicate this place is taken. Well, it's very hard for people to get through, and it's a trip hazard. And I saw some people trip when we were at LSU. They also ask if you're ordering to please look at your server to order. My husband was very soft-spoken, and he'd go, I want the and the and they'd be like, what? So I would have to repeat what my husband wanted by looking at them. And please tell your kids, don't say, give me the burger, I want, how about I would like, may I have? So let's eliminate gimme from our vocabulary. We have a few minutes, and I have so much that I would love to tell you, but I won't. Okay. Oh, how to hold a water glass. Oh, and here's a good one too. I'm gonna borrow your cup. Let's say I just finished eating that bread and I've got some butter on my hands. Well, I would really like to dip my fingers in this water, but I'm not going to. But condensation is your friend. So you can gently stroke your glass a little bit. Don't fondle it, just gently stroke it. And then you can surreptitiously wipe your fingers on your napkin on your lap. And that's how you do it without, if you don't have a finger bowl, and we've never seen finger bowls, but finger bowls are wonderful. They're not to drink out of. Oh, I'll often get the question, can I eat the garnish? That's from the young folks. Not really. You should usually leave the garnish unless it's obviously edible. Oh, and then they ask me, can I eat from somebody else's plate? Not unless you're out with your boyfriend or your sisters or your really good girlfriends, but no, you really should not eat from somebody else's plate. And pace. Pace yourself, especially if you're with business colleagues, pace yourself so that you don't finish first and you don't finish last. You don't want them to wait on you, but you don't want them to still be eating and you've been finished for half an hour. We all ate too fast in college because we had to eat really quickly in between classes, and I'm still like that. I have to really watch it. But be mindful of your pace when you're at a table with other people.
When do you start eating?
When do you start eating? Great question. If you're with someone else for lunch, you usually let your host start to eat first, or if you're at someone's home, your host should pick up their fork. Well, first, your host should put their napkin on their lap first, and then your host should start with the knife or the fork or whatever is called for. That's when you can start eating. In here, obviously, you start to eat when you sit down. But if you're at a banquet, say, and you're at a table of 8 or 10 or 12, and somebody's got the fish, and this group's got the chicken, and this group's got the pork, you may begin to eat when 3 of you have been served, or at a table of 6 or more, you may begin to eat when you're served. So at a big table, you can eat when you're served, because your dining companion should say to you, please go ahead and eat while it's hot. It's because you don't want to eat cold food, and it's just nice of your dining companions to say, please go ahead and eat while it's hot. So table of 6 or more, eat when you're served. That's always a good question. Thank you. What if you spill something on the table? My sister-in-law's mom used to just knock something over at the beginning of every family meal and say, okay, now we got this out of the way. If you spill something, use your napkin. Your dining companions will probably offer their napkins. Apologize once, and then get on with it. Don't apologize for the rest of the meal. Say, I'm sorry, excuse me, and then forget about it. It has happened to everyone. 5 minutes to play Stump the Chump. Yes?
Miss Emily, could you address maybe a minute or so about gentlemen's behavior, like ordering for your date or some things like that?
Okay, so the question is polite behavior for gentlemen. I would say in today's age, if I were a man, I would allow my date or whomever to order for herself. Now, sometimes if it's really fancy, a woman will be given a menu with no prices, and then you might suggest again the lobster or the filet mignon or whatever, but I would let a woman order for herself. Ladies, though, if a man opens a door for you, go through graciously. If he pulls out your chair, you don't have to tell him that you've been liberated since the 70s. Let him push the chair in for you. It's a very nice thing. This is the South. Be gracious and say thank you and be seated, and that's it. George Bell.
Thank you for this presentation. What about grace? Saying a blessing before meals.
The question is, what about grace before meals? You can always say, will you join me in saying a short blessing, or will you join me in saying grace? I think it's a very nice thing to do. Most people are comfortable with it. If someone's not, they can just be silent, keep their hands. So, but it's a nice thing to do, and I always appreciate it. Warren?
In a fancy restaurant, what is the positions you put your knife and fork to signal to the wait staff?
Knife and fork. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I meant to talk about that. Thank you. The question is, where do you place your silverware when you're either resting or when you're finished? Great question. So, let's see, again, I'm directionally impaired. So when you're, yeah, thank you. So when you're still eating, the resting position is the knife goes at the top of the plate and the fork will go down here. That's resting, and it tells your waitstaff, I'm not finished yet. When you have finished, it goes in the 10-20 position, from 10 to 4, like that. They're together so that when your waitstaff comes to take your plate and your fork, ooh, thank you, and your fork, they're going to leave your plate from the left if they're serving you and remove it from the right. Leave from the left, remove from the right. When they come to get this, they'll be able, from the right, to grab your plate and your utensils with one hand. It's safer for you and your dining companion so that you don't get impaled on this large knife. They can take everything safely with one hand. Thank you. I'm glad you asked that. Linda.
For left-handed people, do you leave your drinks on the right the whole time, or can you put them on the left?
For left-handed people, do you leave your drinks on the right or do you move them to the left? You really should leave them on the right because it gets very confusing then with your next-door neighbor as to, is this yours or mine? So you should leave them over there and just reach across and make sure your sleeves aren't dragging through your plate. Yes, sir?
I've got a question. I sneezed and I had to, and I used my left hand and I did this with, is that all right?
If you're going to sneeze, it's best if you have a tissue, if you can grab a tissue out of your pocket. But if you can't, use your napkin.
The left hand is okay?
Either hand is fine, whichever you can get it with most quickly. But then make sure you don't put that on the table until you're really finished and everyone is leaving. Margaret?
Do you pass a basket of bread to the right or to the left?
Question is, do you pass anything to the right or to the left? I always say pass the way it's most expedient. We're not in a sorority or fraternity where you had to do it that way. If Andrew wants the bread and it's right here, I'm not going to pass it all the way around to get it to Andrew. I'm just going to pass it to Andrew. So whatever is most expedient. And it's nice if you can, I could hold the bread basket for Andrew and he could take one, put it on his plate, and then he could pass it on down the line.
So are these primarily American rules?
Yes.
Or is it European?
Okay, is this American or European?
Two-part question.
This is American. Europeans eat a little differently. They don't change hands when they use a fork to convey food to their mouths, and they leave their silverware at the end of a meal in a slightly different position. So what I'm teaching you is American, but when you go to Europe or Japan or China, learn what they do over there.
So are there some, that being said, are there some underlying principles?
For why we
that
do what we do?
apply to this that they also apply in a different way, or is it just, like, how did all this stuff come to be?
We all used to eat like the Europeans, and then the French decided that they didn't want to eat that way, and it switched, or vice versa. We all ate like us, and then they switched. So it's convoluted, but wherever you are, if you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I'm afraid it's 1 o'clock. I'll be here for a few minutes to answer questions.
Thank you, ma'am.